What is good, NIO family? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one I'm going to be talking about the one and only NIO stock and what you should be looking after for the future. I'm also going to break down what I do anticipate to happen to the overall market, how it could affect NIO, and also some very big things coming out all over the world. I'm going to break down how the market may be affected by the new catalysts coming out. We have Jerome Powell speaking on Tuesday again. We also have other big things affecting earnings and how all these things could affect NEO and the overall market. And before I break anything down about all the news coming out, before I talk about how all of this could affect NEO, I do have to mention a couple of things before starting. Firstly, I'm not a financial planner. Make sure you take none of this as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire NEO community as a whole. And the last thing is, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link down below in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo, the link down below, and deposit $100 into the account, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks, each worth up to $3,000. And the best part is you'll also have free level 2 data with $0 in commission trading. Now, the offer ends in just 9 days, so check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. Looking at NEO was down about 6.44% for the day on a Friday, and I do believe that there is still a little bit more downside to come. I'm going to be very blunt with you guys because one of the things I noticed is on the smaller time frames, NEO does have a tendency of playing out the formations that are forming. I think I was looking at the hourly and I saw a potential head and shoulders developing right over here, and it is looking like it's going to play out. Now, on top of that, we also have this gap all the way down to the low 11s and then major support around 10.8. I do think NEO is set for a little bit more downside, but I want to break down other factors that will affect the stock and other very important things that are super, super huge. So we are getting some good news coming out about how many analysts are saying NEO does have lots of potential for upside. But I want to note that NEO did not do the best on their latest deliveries for the month of January. This is due to supply chain constraints, at least to some degree, and then also the lack of demand and also Lunar New Year. So all of that did cause NEO to see a big drop in their deliveries just for the month of January. They only did about 8,500, which is a lot lower than the 9,500 they did in January 2022. So when we tend to see the stock underperform or the company underperform a bit when it comes to deliveries, it was just 1 month, so it's just like too early to say anything too bad about the company. And also Lunar New Year did play a role, but if there are demand issues, NEO has to find a way to increase demand. But I'm just saying it's not the end of the world. NEO is a company that makes those comebacks, and I do believe they're going to find a way. But like I said before, when we have months like that, the stock price tends to not perform as well. When it comes to catalysts affecting the market, we have Pinterest announcing earnings. We also have Hertz, Chipotle, Uber, and the big ones are going to be like Disney and also just a couple other ones like PayPal. So please be ready. It's not going to be as big as last week's earnings, but we do have some big ones, especially Disney and PayPal. I also want to note some other very major things developing in the markets. We can actually see that the United States stock markets do tend to form tops when we get to extreme levels in the fear and greed index, at least over the last year and a half. And I do believe we're getting very close to extreme levels. Currently, the fear and greed index is at extreme greed right now. And let me zoom into that picture. Right here, we're at one of the highest fear and greed indexes we've seen in the past year and a half. So it's very, very high. Lots of buying is coming in, and the market is very likely, in my opinion, to be forming a top. You can actually see a divergence forming right here. Greed is way higher than before, and yet the market is at a lower high. So please be very careful. And I do believe the market's in the topping process, but I'm going to break that down in a couple of minutes. Now, for the week, I want to note that there isn't too much happening on Monday, but on Tuesday, we have Jerome Powell speaking at 12:40 p.m. Eastern Time. So please be ready for that. At almost 1 p.m. Eastern Time, Jerome Powell is going to be giving a speech. I'm going to break down how this may affect NEO in the market in just a couple of minutes. I also want to note that seeing unemployment at this very low level, one of the lowest levels we've seen since the 1960s, that is not the best of signs right now. Because yes, it is fueling the soft landing narrative, but at the same time, we're near like an extreme level, and it's very clear unemployment is going to start going up. There are going to be job losses. And as that happens, that tends to not be the best for the stock market. I will make another video about that in the future, but I just want to note there is going to be more downside in this market, in my opinion. NIO is at 55 million in volume, but we actually dropped on that, and that tends to not be a good sign. Dropping on high volume shows there is lots of strength amongst the sellers. I also want to note that the price pairs ratio, the short volume percentage is also relatively low. It's going to start going up. And like I was saying, the price pairs ratio also is at this low value. This tells me NIO has been underperforming compared to the collective market. And that's not the best of signs. I know nobody wants to hear these bad things, but it is what the data is telling us. Now, like I said in my previous videos, I'm very bullish on NIO. Long term, I'm super, super bullish. I love what they're doing with deliveries, their expansions of NIO Park. I believe this company has so much potential, but for the short term, there are lots of bearish signs as of right now. I also want to note that, okay, for NIO's setup in particular, we have this head and shoulders like formation. And I believe we are set to go for this gap fill. And I think the market is going to likely come down a little bit more before we get a bounce. And I do think NIO might come down to about this 11 to about 10.8 area before we try to see a bit of a bounce in the opposite direction, before we do see some buyers step in to some degree. Now, why do I think NIO can also come down? It's also because of the collective market. I want to note that on SPY, even though I did note that we are most likely in a topping process, we have been respecting this trend, and there's actually signals out there suggesting the market has more room to continue pushing. Even though we saw the market pull back a bit, the bad earnings did play a role. We did see lots of buyers come back. We also saw Apple actually close pretty nicely. And that's because the market shows just the one good thing, and that is guidance being a little bit strong. And it ignored the bad things that came out about Apple. They had one of their worst earnings in about a decade, horrible earnings from Apple, and yet the thing ended up closing pretty green. Buyers are still present. The market's greedy, buyers are still stepping in. The MACD is still wide open, and also the RSI, it's not actually completely overbought, so we have some room, in my opinion. I see two possibilities. Because of the fact the dollar index, I sometimes call it the Dixie. Anyways, it's the DXY or the dollar index. She's starting to break out. And when this happens, the market tends to form its tops. So this tells me we either formed our top or we're about to form a top in the market as this starts to break out, as it's inversely correlated with the stock market. I also believe that for the next month or so, the VIX also has some major upside coming. The VIX was actually down with the market again. And I do believe this thing is going to break out of this giant falling wedge we've been in for quite a while. So what does this all tell me about the market and NIO? Two possibilities. There are two possibilities I'm seeing. Number one, I think the market either already topped and we are going to basically start to downtrend from here, or the market's going to come down a little bit more. And I think this is the most likely possibility. We're going to come back down a little more tomorrow. SPY's going to get to like 410 or so. Then we're going to get a really nice bounce and the market's going to form its final top. Jerome Powell happens to be speaking on Tuesday, so maybe Jerome Powell is going to give us one last pump on Tuesday. Maybe I don't know for sure. And I think SPY, because we're not completely overbought, we also have this gap all the way up here around this like 422 area. So we might form a top around there. We might come down a little bit more tomorrow, maybe have a red day tomorrow, completely fine, to maybe cause some panic. Then they do one last trick. Jerome Powell speaks and we get more buying pressure. We get back into the 420s. If we break 418, we're most likely going to, if we're going to break 418.31, we're most likely going to go to about 422.8 or even higher than that, a little bit higher. And I think we're going to form our final top right there because the market is overbought. It is going to be set for some bigger downside to come. So once again, I'm anticipating what's most likely going to happen is the market comes down a little bit, we get a nice bounce, and we get one last pump before the market tops. Now, it's also possible the market already topped at 418, but like I said, I think it's less likely because the indicators look like they have more room. So I am anticipating a small drop, a nice bounce later into the week, followed by the final top to be formed of this rally before the market reverses. That's my own opinion. For NIO, what does all of this mean? Well, I don't want to talk too much about the later days, but I do think NIO is set for more downside. This head and shoulders like formation on the hourly, it looks to me like it's going to continue to play out, bringing NIO all the way down to about 11 to 10.8, maybe even a little lower, because we do have more gaps in the 10s. I don't know how much lower it will go and how it's going to react to 10.8. We could try to bounce off here. This was a major bounce area, but I do believe it's going to continue to come down. It might even break lower because there was some bad news that came out involving the relations between China and the United States, right? There was that whole balloon situation where the US ended up bringing it down. Not very good for their relationship, right? And when that happens, it's not the best for Chinese tickers. So I also want to note that on the daily, we have a very bearish signal coming, and that's the fact that the PPO on the MACD is on the verge of getting a big crossover. This is telling me that, look, if the MACD does cross in this direction, we're going to see some more bearish momentum. Look at what happened like right here when that happened. Right here, this is when NIO was really starting to come down. Uh, Another example is when it crossed over right here. Right here, it crossed over and NIO did have more downside to come. So I'm not saying NIO has to crash, but I am saying that this is a not the best of things for the bulls, and I do think NIO is going to have some downside. So I'm going to be watching this 10.8 level and also the gap fills below. Unfortunately, it looks like there is more downside to come. We also have this gap down here around 10.3. No guarantee we fill that, but if we break below 10.8, we could slowly be getting ready to fill the gap down there by the later days of the week. So please be very careful. I am seeing some potential for downside. For tomorrow, I'm predicting NIO is going to come down to 10.8 or so, maybe even a little bit lower, 10.6, and just bounce around there. And I think we might get a small bounce on Tuesday thanks to Jerome Powell and the market. But then when the market tops, and I believe we're getting very close to the top, then I believe NIO is going to start coming down even harder with the overall market. All right. That's what I'm seeing later on during the week, maybe sometime this week, maybe going into next week. And I think CPI might play a big role in that. So that's basically the gist of what I'm trying to say, guys. Please have an absolutely incredible rest of the day. Once again, I'm anticipating some more downside for NIO for tomorrow, then maybe a bounce, hopefully, during Jerome Powell's speech or something on Tuesday. And then we might see even more downside later on. I just wanted to note that. I want you all to be very, very calm, cool, and collected. And like I said before, it's also very important to watch the news because right now there are lots of tensions between the United States and China. This is not helping NIO and XPong and many EVs out there. Thank you for listening. Have a great day. Remain calm, cool, and collected. And I'll see you guys in the next one. NIO to the moon because the long term future is still incredibly bright. And peace out.